Well, hey, everybody, welcome back.
Hey, everybody.
We are Generation X Paranormal. I'm Logan.
I'm Nicole.
But you already knew that. Hey, so we have, honestly, probably one of the more interesting guests we've ever had. I mean, they're all interesting, but this one, I think you guys are going to really like this one. So we have Dr. Scott Taylor on, and he has some interesting information about not near-death experience, but shared death experience. Now, there's a difference. So,
yes.
Yeah. What can you tell us about Dr. Taylor?
So Dr. Taylor, he is the president of the Expanded Awareness Institute. So it helps people curious about near-death experiences explore what that experience means to them and to our culture as a whole. Dr. Taylor's gift is the ability to make the exploration of the non-physical universe accessible to the curious. He is also the author and voice of 6 best-selling CDs of guided meditations on near-death experiences in his Into the Light series. He is a spiritual teacher, speaker, and researcher on near-death experiences.
I mean, that really just says it all right there. So let's go ahead and bring on Dr. Scott Taylor.
Let's talk to him.
Hey, Scott, how are you doing?
I am well. Thank you, Logan and Nicole, for inviting me this evening. I've been looking forward to this.
Oh, good.
So we honestly, it's been great. You know, I'll be honest with you, especially when we get into the topic of what we're going to talk about. I've got a lot of personal experiences and potentially Nicole does too. But before we get into that, can you kind of tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, sure. I grew up in a small Midwestern town in southern Minnesota, led a normal childhood, raised in the mainline Presbyterian faith. And for the first 20 years of my working career, I ran department stores in outstate Minnesota. And then I did 20 years of being a faculty member of the state of Minnesota, where I mentored small business owners. And along with that, I was a faculty member at the Monroe Institute, where I learned this particular style of meditation that we'll probably talk about. And then became their executive director and retired from there. And so for the last, 3 years or so, I've been a podcaster, and I've taught on the Shift Network all about bilocation as a way of meditating and how people can explore the afterlife on their own before they have their own transition, and certainly not having to wait to have an NDE, which is a really terrible thing. That whole trauma body, ooh, don't do that.
Right.
Yeah,
there's better ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, I certainly have had my experience. We'll talk about that later, but yeah, that's pretty amazing. Obviously, we're going to talk about your meditation and the thing that you teach, but what is I guess kind of the 3,000-foot view of a shared death experience?
Oh, that's a great question. Okay, so let's start with what more people know, which is a near-death experience. And that typically happens when the physical body has been hurt or traumatized so much that it dies. And then our non-physical body, or our soul, leaves, goes out and has an adventure in the afterlife. And then those wonderful people here on Earth do something to the physical body to bring it back to life again. And when the body reanimates, then our soul comes, sucked right back in again. And when the people are able, they can tell their story. Contrast that with a shared death experience, which a common scenario would be you're in a hospital room and you're with a loved one, and they are making their final transition. And when they leave their physical body for the last time, you're invited to go with them. And so you leave with them, and you can either go as an observer, or you can go and actually experience what they're experiencing. And then at some time, that adventure is complete and you come back to your physical body.
Hmm.
Please note that there's going to be two real differences between the two. One is there's nothing wrong with you. I mean, you're sitting in a chair when that happens, or you know, you're just fine. And the second is that in near death experiences, you'll hear a few people talk about a less than positive experience. Um, they meet some grumpy figure, or they're scared about something. That does not happen with a shared death experience. When you go and you are witnessing somebody's final transition, it is always 100% full stop. Their soul leaves their physical body and goes into a loving, compassionate afterlife. That scary thing, that less than positive event, that seems to be related to the physical world, and or maybe it has to do with some lesson you're supposed to learn during your near death experience.
Hmm.
And let's see, I'm going to pick on you, Logan.
Okay.
So it might be, where, you leave your physical body and you are greeted by a guide, or a really, dark figure in a robe or something. And they counsel you. Let's just call it the 2x4 alongside the head method of counseling. It's like, whack,
Yeah.
Logan, you are not paying attention. We have been trying to get a hold of you for years and you're not listening. Here's what you should be doing, and then they go on to detail, how you're supposed to get on the path. Now, that could seem rather scary, and you might consider that less than a positive experience, but it was designed to help you in your growth.
Okay.
And so that's the difference between the two, is that when you are witnessing an actual death, somebody making their final transition, they always go to a positive, loving universe.
Hmm. That's interesting.
That's really profound.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
It gives really hope. It's like,
Yeah.
oh,
Right.
all the nasty things about, going to the underworld, or, there's going to be scary demon-like creatures there ready to, judge you. None of that is true.
Well,
So
it's a lot more comforting than, some of the other things you hear from time to
Well, yeah,
time.
that's why everybody's so afraid to die,
Yeah,
because of the judgment and what's going to
exactly,
happen to them.
for
exactly.
sure. You having done some research, you've got quite an amazing story. Um, as far as your particular shared death experience, or SDE, if you want to shorten it. Um, can you kind of tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, I'd love to. Um, it's 1981, and I'm in love with a woman. Her name is Mary Frances. She and her son Nolan, who had just turned 7, uh, had been out sailing on a lake in southern Minnesota. And on their way home, they were involved in a horrific car accident. And Mary Fran was killed outright,
Mm.
and Nolan sustained a mortal head wound, and it took him 6 days to make his transition. That becomes important because as we were gathering at the Mayo Clinic to be with Nolan and hold vigil for him, it meant that there was quite a crowd of relatives and friends that were able to come and be there and support each other. Mary Fran was one of 9, and so you can just imagine. I mean, there's brothers and sisters and boyfriends and girlfriends and spouses and aunts and uncles and grandpa and grandma, and I mean it was quite the crew. This becomes again important because there were so many of us, and Nolan was in a small hospital room where he was in a coma that he never would come out of. He stayed in that the whole time. We divvied up the visiting.
Mhm.
And so we said, okay, every 2 hours, two of us will go in and be with Nolan. This is the result of the nurses on the floor reminding us that people who are in comas, usually the last sense to go is hearing. So even if they couldn't respond, it was really important for Nolan to be able to hear the stories and to hear how much we were there and supporting him, that kind of thing. Well, as the luck of the draw would have it, I'm there. Um, my shift is with Mary Fran's oldest sister, Jannie, and we're 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. on the morning of the sixth day. And we go in and we've got his favorite storybook and we read him stories. Oh, you guys. Um, his uncles, about midnight, had gone throughout the Mayo Health System and stolen the cushions off of the couches in the lobbies and put them in the waiting room because there were so many people and there wasn't, a lot of places to sit and nowhere to lay down. So they
Right.
kind of had a carpet of these cushions. Anyway, so we told him this story, and it's funny, and it's
Mhm.
what people were saying and how they were teasing each other, and it was a joyous thing. But it gets to be about 4:45 in the morning, and Jannie, who's a trained emergency room nurse, um, says to me, Scott, let's check. And so she goes to the end of the bed and she pulls up the clipboard that shows kind of the progression of what his vital signs are doing. I mean, his whole bed was surrounded by them. And she looks at me and she looks at the clipboard and she shakes her head and says, Scott, it's time for us to say goodbye. And so the two of us pull up chairs next to Nolan's head and we tell him how proud we are of him and how hard he has fought to stay with us here in the physical. But if his mother should come, reminding that she died 6 days before,
Mhm.
but if his mother should come and want him to go with her, that would be the right thing to do. And that we loved him dearly and that we would miss him, and then we said our personal goodbyes, and then it's now 5 o'clock and we get up to leave and the next shift comes in. It's 45 minutes later and the nurse on the floor comes in and wakes everybody up and says, it his vital signs are now decreasing at a rather rapid rate, so you should go in. So this whole group of us, I don't know, it's like 40. It was a lot of
Wow.
people file into this little hospital room, and as luck would have it, I'm one of the last people to enter the room, and it's already 4 deep around the bed. So I said, well, that's just silly. So I go to sit on the windowsill next to Mary Fran's youngest brother, Willie, and there we just wait. And, really, there isn't much to do.
Right.
Just sit there and, watch
Mhm.
the heart monitor, and
Yep.
it's slowly, slowly decreasing. When it flatlines, what I experienced was Mary Fran coming across the veil and scooping her son out of his physical body. And they had this extraordinary, this exquisite reunion. as only you could imagine between a mother and child. And then that surprised me because I was able to feel what was going on between the two of them. But what surprised me even more was that the two of them then turned to me, came over and embraced me, and the three of us left and went to the light.
Hmm.
And when we entered into the light, um, it was the most extraordinary experience. It was as if I was immersed in the love of the universe. I was one with all things. I could understand what was happening around me, but that really didn't make any difference to me because what was important was that Mary Fran and Nolan and I were there and we had a chance to express our love and affection for each other. We had a chance to say our goodbyes. Um, I was at work when the accident happened, so I was, nowhere near. And then we had a chance just to be together for a while. And at some point, it just felt complete, that it was good. And then the two of them turned and went further into the light, and I came back to my physical body. So I'm going to pause there for just a second because this story is longer. It has 3 parts, and that's the end of part 1. Do you have any questions?
Oh,
I'm just thank you for sharing that first off. I'm sure that's very hard to speak about. Um, for anyone that's been in a hospital room and watched something like that happen, I've done that with my father, so
mhm.
it's a very hard thing to talk about. So thank you for sharing. Um, so I guess I don't know. Like it's like you saw her come and scoop him up, and then you just it's almost like I guess like a meditation type thing that you could feel yourself going and just like you were experiencing it. I'm guessing is the way you're describing it.
Yeah, it was. I, I think more accurately it would be is not that I was in the light, I was
Hmm.
of the light
Okay.
because it was like I was one with the light and the love of the universe. So, um, yeah, it wasn't just little me
Hmm.
there, it was me connected to everything else.
Okay.
And in particular, it was me connected with Mary, Fran, and Nolan.
Hmm.
And um, so when I talk about the world of duality where we are right now, um, I think of it as being uh, run by the words either or, like
Right.
I am me and, Nicole, you are you. It's either you or me.
Right.
But in the afterlife, we move into a different universe, one that is, I call it the unity universe, where everything is connected to everything else. And it's run by the words both and. So I am me, Nicole, you are you. And so we're separate and we are also merged together with this wonderful thing that is human consciousness. So it's like all of us share a consciousness on some level, and then that again is shared with the universe, the consciousness of the universe at some level. So it's um, I get to be me, and I get to be part of this thing that is the human species.
Hmm.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah. I guess one of my initial thoughts or questions are, I mean, had you had any run up prior to this that you were, because it just, first of all, it
No, the
blows me
quick
away.
answer is like I mentioned, I grew up in a mainline Presbyterian church, and
Right.
Right.
let's just say the lexicon of the Presbyterian church does not include being able to witness somebody coming across the
Right.
veil and scooping
Wow.
her son out of her physical body, and then being able to be taken to the light and communicate. I mean, no,
Talk about a short
no.
runway.
It's just,
Jeez.
I was
Yeah.
Wow.
Little League, Boy Scout, swim team.
Hmm.
None of that. It
Especially
wasn't
with that many
particular.
people in the room.
Yeah.
That just like floors me. You'd think like something like that would happen if you're the sole person in the room. It's quiet, but with that many people,
Yeah.
I
Yep.
mean, I guess it really doesn't matter, but I mean, you just automatically think like a bunch of people. So did they say what you were, or like how you, you looked during while this was happening or anything like that?
Well, um, you must be psychic. That is a perfect segue to part B of my
Okay.
story.
We'll keep going then.
So I am up there in the light with Mary Fran and Nolan, and 100% of my consciousness is up there with them. And 100% of my consciousness was there in the hospital room with all the relatives. So I had this split,
Hmm.
and I don't even want to call it split because that implies 50-50. And it wasn't like that. It was, I was all the way there. I was all the way in the hospital room. And I certainly didn't have a word to describe it then, but I do now. It's called bilocation, where
Okay.
I could
Okay.
be in two places at the same time. And I know this is true because it was if my body was filled with that loving consciousness of the universe and it was just trying to burst out, that this joy, this love was, just wanted to radiate. And it was radiating from my face. And if anybody had looked at me immediately after Nolan's passing, anybody else in the room, they would have seen this huge grin, this expression of ecstasy and joy, and that would have been entirely inappropriate.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I did the only thing I could think of to do, which was to cover my face with my hands. And I stayed in that position until um, the two of them went further into the light, and then, both parts of me could come back together again and be whole. And then I could lower my hands and, be part of a room filled with people actively grieving, and the stuff you do. I mean, you
Hmm.
hug and you cry on each other's shoulder, and and appreciate the moment that, Mary Fran had died 6 days before, and Nolan had just made his transition. So it was incredibly sad
Hmm.
to be there.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I had been incredibly happy.
Hmm.
And those two experiences of joy and grief for me are just totally interlinked. I can't separate them. So when I tell you this story about Mary Fran and Nolan, sometimes it catches in my throat.
Sure.
And
Hmm.
part of it is grief, but the other part of it is remembering how how amazing and wonderful it is.
Right.
And you get choked up over that too. So yeah, they're permanently woven together, and that's one of the mysteries of the experience, I think.
Yeah.
So
That's
that's the end of part B.
Yeah. Wow.
that's quite a tapestry of emotion. That's for sure.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, you know, I guess another question I have is, you mentioned there was a lot of people in the room
Yeah.
with, I guess without being too upfront, why you? Why? I mean, if there were so many people there, how was it that it just either A only happened with you, or yeah, I mean, if you can talk a little bit about that.
Logan, you must be psychic too,
I try.
because that's the perfect segue into part C.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so hold that thought. It's going to take me a second to get there.
There.
Um, so we fast forward about 15 years, and I'm at the University of St. Thomas, and I'm doing my doctoral work in education and leadership, and I'm doing my dissertation. I'm writing my dissertation about near-death experiences, and I'm looking for people to interview. And I was having a really tough time because I thought I could go to like hospices or nursing homes or hospitals, and I would get paired up so I could have conversations with people who'd been there and come back. Well, I was running up against HIPAA laws,
Hmm.
and rightfully so.
Right.
I get that, and so out of frustration, I wrote to the women in Mary Fran's family who, most of them were involved in healthcare in some flavor. I
Hmm.
said, how should I do this? How can I find people who really had a profound experience like this near-death experience? Well, it turns out that one of the sisters wrote me back and said she'd had one. Pause. She would like to remain anonymous, so I'm going to call her the sister from
Okay.
now
Okay.
on. It's a little awkward, but try to do right by her.
Hmm.
Understood.
Anyway, so I agree. We get together and I conduct an interview, and she tells me her near-death story. And then at the end of it, I'm packing up my stuff, and this thought occurs to me, which is at Nolan's bedside, something really unusual happened to me. I wonder if anything unusual happened to you too. And the sister just looked at me, and her eyes they were just huge. And so, taking that as a yes, I hit the record button and said, all right, tell you what, you tell me your story first, and then I'll tell you mine, and we'll compare notes. Great. This is what she told me. She said, Scott, I remember it distinctly because I was standing bedside and you were across the room sitting on the windowsill with Willie. I said, yep, that's right. And she said, when Nolan flatlined, what happened to me, meaning the sister, said, what happened to me was um, Mary Fran came across the veil. She scooped Nolan up out of his physical body. They had this exquisite reunion in which I was able to participate. Then the two of them turned to her, and scooped her up out of her physical body, and they went into the light. There, they had a chance to affirm their love and affection. They had a chance to say goodbye. And after a period of time, the two of them went further into the light, and she was able to come back to her physical body.
Hmm.
Wow.
She used almost identical words to describe her experience as I have just told you.
Hmm.
And what happened was in that instant, any doubts that I had that this experience was caused by grief, or maybe I read something and made it up, blah, 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 you know, you can talk to yourself a lot about something that doesn't really fit your experience, and you wonder if it's real. In an instant, all those doubts just evaporated.
Hmm.
I knew what had happened between Mary Fran Nolan and I was real. And cool thing is, the reverse was also true. By telling the sister my story, all her doubts disappeared, and she could, remain comfortable and firm in her experience, so that she could claim it as being real too. So now I'm going to get to your question, Logan.
Okay.
Sorry it took so long,
No.
but it goes like this. There's a guy by the name of William Peters. He wrote a book called After, and it's the first scientific study of shared death experiences that is large. I mean, it's 900 people. It's a big study, and in it, he describes why me and not other people. And his conclusion is this: first off, you have to be open and receptive to the experience. Well, I was just sitting there on a windowsill next to Willie, and all I'm doing is watching the heart monitor. So I wasn't actively grieving. I wasn't talking. I wasn't driving a car. None of that. I was just sitting there. Second is that there had to be a strong heart connection between the people making the transition and me, and that was certainly true. Um, um, and especially with Nolan, um, his biological father had never taken responsibility for the conception and never supported the family. And so, as a result, Mary Fran never told Nolan who his biological father was. And so, when I came into their life, um, Nolan wanted a dad,
Right.
just like every other 7-year-old in the first grade,
Right.
and I was more than willing to play that role. He was a wonderful kid. He was just great. And so we were bonding,
Mm-hmm.
and I certainly had the connection with his mother, Mary Fran. So so there was a strong heart connection. And third, and I find this really insightful, is that the person, or in this case, the people, Mary Fran and Nolan, had to be the ones to reach back and do the invitation. So Mary Fran and Nolan invited me to go with them into the light. And they did that by embracing me, which essentially meant that our energies merged. And so I'm now at the vibratory frequency of where they are in the light. And so it's a lot easier for me then to enter into that space. It'd be really tough for me to be in a hospital room and try to guess what I'd have to do in order to go with them, and
Right.
how
Yeah.
I have to change, my physical and non-physical bodies in order to um, be in the right state to go with them. So there's a heart connection. I'm available, and they made the invitation, and hence I was able um, to be with them in the light.
Hmm. Wow. And it's so interesting that happened to both you and the sister, but neither one of you saw the other person.
Nope,
So it
nope,
was
we
like a
didn't.
separate experience, but at the same time, which is just kind of blowing my mind a little bit.
Wow.
And we in the afterlife, there's no such thing as time. So things happen outside of time, and so when I'm with them, it's at a different time than when they were with the sister, or they bilocated too, and they were with me, and they were with the sister
Yeah.
that's when your mind starts going and going,
Right.
oh, what really happened? I don't know.
Jeez.
Someday I'll find out. But
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. We all will someday.
Wow. I that I'll have to admit there are very
Yeah.
few guests that I have that just completely blow my mind, and that
Uh-huh.
first of
well,
all,
I'm glad that I can make an impression on you there, Logan.
well, there's some reason behind it. Now I didn't have necessarily a near death, but I had a brain bleed about 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, something like that.
Never
Um,
good.
and I think the part that got me was the absence of an experience. It was like the light was there and extinguished, and I to try to explain to somebody that there was nothingness. you can't even explain that. There was void,
Yes.
and
Hmm.
um, I guess for me, I always try to rationalize. Okay, well, maybe I was still part of my physical body, so that's why I never had an experience. So my brain just kind of rebooted, for lack of better words.
Oh, I
Um,
believe that happens too. But
yeah, for sure. Um,
there is an explanation for that.
yeah, by all
Or
means.
if you, so we know from extensive research, over 30,000 near-death experiences have been recorded and analyzed and that sort of thing. That when people leave their physical bodies and they go into the light, there's three different kinds of light. The first one is the white light at the end of the tunnel,
Mhm.
and you've all seen that. It's on TVs and
Right.
movies. I mean, let's face it, even Harry Potter had an experience, right?
Right.
Right.
In that last one, he has the duel with he who shall not be named,
Right.
Right.
and um, and he is bested by Voldemort.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Watch out.
and um, and he goes up into the light, and there he meets Dumbledore, and they have an exchange, and he learns things that he possibly couldn't possibly have known from the physical world, and then he's sent back to be in his physical body, and of course then he reanimates and continues uh, the fight with Voldemort. So it's part of our popular culture. So that is, and it's also the most common type of light that people enter into. There's clear light, which is what happened to me, which is, say we're in a room and I'm in a clear light experience, and what happens is you begin to realize that everything in the physical universe is made up of the loving light, the loving consciousness of the universe. And and as such, you realize that not only is this microphone made up of light and the books behind me and this desk that I'm sitting at, but I am made up of the same stuff.
Hmm.
And that's how I am connected to everything. And it's also the reason why people, when they make their final transition, 100% of the time you go to the loving light of the universe because you've never left it. You are made up of the same stuff of the universe, this loving consciousness. It just happens to be at a slightly slower vibration, so it can become physical matter, but we are made up of the that love that is the universe. So that's a clear light experience. But the last one is called a black light experience. And the black light is the source of all things. It is known as the source or void in Genesis 2. If you're a Hebrew Bible fan, um, you know at the very beginning there isn't anything. There is the void.
Mhm.
There is the blackness. And oh shoot, do I have that quote here somewhere? No. Um, but it's um, and it is at least in some versions it's called the deep, right? So it's black, it's void, it's the deep, and it is the place from which everything is birthed. So all physical matter, all energy, everything we think of as being part of the universe comes out of this this void state. It is where we manifest from. And the people that I've had a chance to talk to who've had this experience, they'll often use words like It's the womb of God. Isn't that lovely?
Wow.
Hmm.
It's the
Yeah.
womb of God where everything is birthed from. And it's consciousness, our consciousness, that forms this, whatever this substance is in the black light in the void, that allows, um, you know, everything to come out of it. So it's a very precious state. Um, and you are incredibly lucky to have had that experience.
Hmm.
Um, count yourself among the few who've been able to touch that space. It's truly extraordinary.
Yeah, I'm gonna need a minute on that one.
Having
Whew.
some feelings right now.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that because
Mm-hmm.
I've been struggling with that for quite a while now. Yeah, I might need a second on that one.
Okay, so while you're collecting yourself there, I was teaching at the Monroe Institute, and it was a class on how to do meditation and reach these some of these states that
Mm-hmm.
near death experiencers go to. And after I got done with the whole week, this woman comes up to me and she tells me that she had gone to this black space, and it is truly ineffable. I mean, there aren't words, there aren't English words to describe that space other than my feeble attempt. And and so when she came back, she went to visit her pastor and and to see if he had any insights as to how she could understand this space and be um, more comfortable with this, something really out of context for her. And the minister told her that because Jesus wasn't there and because it was a black space, it was bad. And this love that she felt being in that space meant that she had become a minion of the devil.
Yikes.
Jeez.
And she had been living with this idea that she had gone to hell and loved it for 15 years.
Oh my gosh.
And and so what I'm trying to say is that it isn't like that. This is
No.
an aspect of God. This is, where God births everything that we know and love. It is the source. It's this incredibly loving space. And so God shows love in three ways, white, black, and clear light. And if you're a Christian, you can run with the Trinity on that. But uh, the point is that it's really dangerous to take and put our dogma, our limited understanding that we gain in the physical universe, and try to plunk it into the non-physical universe, that where it might not apply at all.
Right.
And so when people are in this state, it's like, please just reserve judgment for a while and let the truth of the experience come out. Because if you have touched the love of the universe, that is real. That is real, and you can't be fooled by that.
Right.
And and besides, the whole devil thing is associated with the vibrations of the physical world.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as we leave our physical bodies, we're not in that realm anymore.
Hmm.
And so if you want to have a belief system, that's a really um, small and conceptualized view of the world that isn't really um, what's real once you get past the physical world. So my one of my stories about that is, people will tell me something like, um, you know, the Earth is 13.6 billion years old. And this other person over here says, yeah, but no, it's 6,000 years old. And they have this dialogue back and
Mm-hmm.
forth because they have different views from their religious training. Fine. And when I get into those arguments, I have to go, you're both right. Because when you are in that space, it is outside of time and space. So, picture yourself as some monk on a mountaintop somewhere, and you're meditating your brains out, and you have been shown how the universe was created. And you're trying to describe something that happens outside of time and space with very limited vocabulary. And the only thing you can do is to try to describe it in a story that people will understand.
Right.
And, this ineffability problem really comes to bite us in that sort of thing. So what's a day? I mean, that doesn't even make sense
Mm-mm.
when you're in that space. That term just literally doesn't have any meaning. So we struggle with that, and I have to give, you know, it's like, I get it. Your experience says that it feels like this. My experience meant that it felt like that. And I think we're both right,
Right.
because
Sure.
we're trying to describe something that is beyond those limitations that words have.
Exactly. Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, we've got a whole bunch of questions, but I still think that this is kind of the sweet spot I want to stay in, if that's okay. Um, there was one question I did want to bring up because of the nature of what happened to me. Not to make everything about me, but
Go
so
for it. I've been talking a long time, Logan. Go.
so the role of the brain, um, i- is it is that the origin of our consciousness, or what? Because apparently my brain doesn't want me to be conscious at that particular point. But what I guess basically is the brain the origin of your consciousness?
Well, see, that is a great question, and goes right to the heart of what we've been talking about. Because my view of the world is, and my experience of it, both for me as a shared death experiencer and my academic research, says that our consciousness resides within our non-physical body, and it, for a time, inhabits this, rather marvelous physical thing that is a human body. But after a while, the human body gets tired, it wears out, and it passes away. At which time, our consciousness leaves our physical body and returns home into the light. And so, how I like to think of it is that our consciousness needs the brain to interpret it to a physical body. So our consciousness says, Scott, raise your left hand and wave. And okay, there we go. And it was my brain that was the filter, was like the receiver. Think of like a radio accepting a transmission from an FM radio station. It turns it into sound. Well, that's what the brain does for the human body. It interprets all those signals from our consciousness and allows us to speak and move and dream. And I mean, there's, everything we think of as being human exists first in our non-physical body then is transmuted by its interaction with the brain, and then, ta-da, we can live in the physical world.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, obviously that what you're saying makes a lot of sense. It's just I've never, I guess I never thought about the non-physical versus the physical when it comes to your brain's role, which makes perfect sense. I mean, you think about it, the brain is there to kind of be the usher of what you physically need to do, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your conscious needs to be
Well, no, because like,
tethered to it, or I guess basically it doesn't originate from there.
Yeah.
no.
So there's another role that the brain does, and that is to filter. Remember, we were talking a little bit before about we are permanently connected. We are part of this loving consciousness that is the human consciousness, or the unity universe, where we are connected to all things. Well, we live in a physical universe. And if we had all this input from all this stuff from all time and space, we couldn't survive this place.
No, we could not.
You know, it's, you know, we've got to drive a car and pay attention to the red lights, and, you know, the, tiger in the grass and the snakes in the trees. I mean, this is a dangerous world we live in if we're not paying attention.
Yes,
Right.
indeed.
And so the brain is a wonderful filter for all of the input that comes in. And it says, okay, you're doing this activity. You've got to be focused in a certain way. And so we're going to allow you to do that by excluding all this other information from, 13 lives ago when you were a Roman soldier. You know,
Right.
that'd be a problem.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it allows us to live very successfully here in the physical universe. And so when you have a near-death experience or a shared death experience, and even sometimes a what's known in the trade as a spiritually transformative experience, an SDE, you have the chance to then experience life if you bilocate. Here you are in your physical body, and then there's part of you that's just boom. There's no filters. You're able to connect with Mary Fran and Nolan, and you get to be one with the light. And but meanwhile, you're sitting on this windowsill.
Yeah.
So
Right.
the filters that are in the brain, poof, they get blown open, or at least there's big holes in there. And it's why when you read the research around near-death experience, so many people come back and they have abilities, psychic being one of them.
Yeah.
And that's just a removal of one of the filters, and it allows more information in than maybe you had come in before. So I'm guessing, Logan, that after your experience, you were a different person, and there was other information that came in.
In more ways than
Certainly,
I
you
could ever
appreciated
explain.
Nicole more.
Well, yeah, for sure. There's no question about that. Yeah, I think that having that experience, first of all, beyond transformative, because to come that close, just the sheer numbers behind it, to know how lucky I am to still be sitting here, and the percentages, that right there took me. Well, it's still. I mean, I still have to go through a lot of different things just to wrap my head around that, but it has kind of made me a lot more in tune to a lot of things that I never thought I would be. A lot more sensitive on a lot of different things than I used to be. Or maybe I'm just listening to it now. But no, it had, yeah. And to be honest with you, it's a lot of stuff that I still wrestle with. It's not a finished product. It's not a polished product by any stretch of the mean. Lots of great people and great therapy have gotten me a lot further along the road than I was before, especially the person sitting over here. But yeah, no, it did. It has made me a lot more in touch with a lot of things, especially when it comes to, well, kind of what we're talking about. The spirituality behind it,
Mm-hmm.
the connection between mind and body, all the anxiety that I've had over the years to know that it's just my brain trying to make sense of a lot of different things. I mean, listen, we could talk ad nauseum of all the different things that I've tried to come into grips with, but no, you're absolutely right. That experience was, I mean, beyond profound. It is probably, I would assume, until the day I leave the earth, will probably be the most profound experience I'll ever have in my life, at least in that particular realm, for lack of better words. Life, physicality, afterlife, all those sort of things. That will probably be the capstone of what happened to me in my life during my physical part of being here.
Well, one of the things that comes out of near-death research is when people come back, they are intensely curious. And what you just described over the last minute is is you trying to come to grips with how do you live with what you know, and what you don't know. Well, shoot, how do I think about that with this new lens?
Mm.
And how does that work for me? And then how does that work for us as a couple? And how does it work with me and the physical world? And then, Lord, I got these connections with the non-physical world too. And it's um, it's a wonderful thing, because what it means is we not only are you unfinished, you're more unfinished than you were before.
Yeah,
It's
Yes.
like there's
to
just
put that lightly.
so many rabbit holes that you can go down to go, wow,
Yeah,
this is just so cool.
absolutely.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's no accident that you're doing a podcast and you're meeting all these people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the paranormal
That's right.
Yep.
podcast. So you're living the definition of what it's like to come back from a black light experience and trying to figure it out. And luckily, you have a wonderful partner who
Yes.
can help you figure it out. And if not, she'll tell you where to go. And
Daily. Yeah.
That's true.
just saying. Yeah.
Yep.
Wow. Yeah, that's and you're right. That's exactly why we started this. It
Mm-hmm.
happened out of it was a genesis of what happened to me and things that we had talked about, in our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's oof.
And what's interesting is he's usually more of the skeptic than I am.
Yes, I am.
And so I've kind of brought him over to my side a little bit. This has helped
Aha.
that along.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
skeptic is a good thing,
Yeah.
because it's about testing.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I believe to be true now with my new lens.
Yeah.
Right.
What's real? How can that be augmented? How can
Right.
I test that so it becomes really part of my belief structure? That's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Like I was
huge.
saying with the sister, it took that to make the doubts go away. It was tested and found to be real.
Right.
And, you know, at that point, you've taken another step to go, okay, well, then now what?
Mm-hmm.
Where are we going to go from here? If that was
Yeah.
so cool. All right.
Right. Well, since we're talking about testing and skepticism, what does science say about near-death experiences? What is their explanation for why this is happening?
Well, the science on near death experiences is vast, and it has been truly well, I think the research on it is 50 years old or something. It's one of the most studied phenomena in human experience. And so, as I have described the what happens during a near death and what happens during a shared death experience, the data backs that up. And so we are really confident that this is a real event. It happens, these are the common elements, these are the common after effects, and ta-da. And now shared death experiences are going through the same kind of rigor that near-death experiences had gone to. There's just less of us, so
Right.
it's taken a while, and partly it's because it needs to be known more,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also needs to become part of our culture. Like near death. Oh my gosh, back when there were soap operas, I mean, every other soap opera had a near death
That's true.
experience in it.
Yeah,
And
yeah, I did.
and it's happening now with shared death experiences that people go, "Oh, that's a thing? You can do that?" And you go, "Yeah, yeah, you can." And there's some things you can do to prepare and have at it, because the people who work in hospice, um, they have multiple shared death experiences, many of them, because it's like what we said. You have a heart connection with the person you're taking care of, and you're open and available, and there's an invitation from the person making that transition to the care worker. Said, I'd like, you've been taking care of me for 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love for you to come along. And, I'm going to invite my son and my daughter and my wife,
You're right.
so it doesn't necessarily have to be just one person. It's just the science behind it is really good, really good. Do we know everything yet? Nah, we don't know
No.
everything yet, but we know a lot.
Hmm.
And that's where organizations like the International Association of Near-Death Studies, they have a huge database. It's wonderful. Go there, read the stories. Another one is called NDERF, which is Near-Death Experience Research Foundation. And both of them have extensive websites that you can read the stories in their raw form, but then there's lots of published articles. And there's a scientific journal just devoted to the academic research on near-death experience. So, anybody who's interested in this field, there's tons to entice you and lead you down that rabbit hole.
That's cool. I didn't realize it was that extensive.
Yeah, that's wow.
And if you want a fun experience, the International Association for Near-Death Experiences has a conference every year. Here this year in 2024, it will be in Phoenix, Arizona,
Hey.
and it's a long weekend over Labor Day,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a hoot.
Hmm.
It's really more fun than one person should have. Because about half the people who attend are near-death experiencers, and the other half are just really curious, and
Mm-hmm.
and so there's this great dialogue that happens in the hallways and at lunch, and
Oh, I'm
and then of
sure.
course there's great presentations. But that's another thing that's
No,
great
that
fun.
sounds like a blast, actually.
Yeah, it'd
I'd
be
love to go there.
interesting to
Yeah.
attend that for sure.
Well, I feel like we could probably talk for another 10 hours, but um, blown away. Absolutely blown away.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Is there any parting thoughts you'd like our audience to know, and also kind of how our audience can find you?
Sure. The easiest place to find me is at my website, which is neardeathmeditations.com. So there's a plural there, neardeathmeditations.com. And there I've got my guided meditation albums. I've got the courses that are on demand. I've got live courses coming up. And so if you're at all interested in experiencing it, it meaning the form of meditation that I teach, I learned from Mary Fran and Nolan, which is the bilocation.
Mm-hmm.
You can be in the light and you can be in your physical body at the same time. It's really easy to learn, and it's a profound way to experience those vibratory states that are experienced by near-death and shared-death experiencers. So it's a way that you can explore the afterlife and not have to go through that whole trauma thing. And it's great fun. So you can start easy with an album. I mean, they're $25, really, no big deal. And then there's various lengths of courses, and they're all wonderful.
Wow.
So if I'm, pat myself on the back.
Yeah.
No, I'm sure they are. I mean, just the experience of the last hour has been tremendous. So, I urge our audience to please reach out and
check those out.
check that out.
But I'll
But
make sure and put the links on our Facebook page to all those things.
yeah, and I mean, honestly, it's been an absolute honor to have you.
Yes, it has.
Thank you so much for making time for us tonight. And we look forward to maybe talking to you again.
I would love that. You guys are great. This has been really fun.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that.
Double thumbs up, one for each of you.
Yeah.
Hey, all right. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and let you go. And thank you so much for being on our show.
My pleasure.
Wow. In case you guys hadn't noticed, we
tend to have these guests on where we don't know how to react afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, I hope you guys are on the same ride we're on. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, that was tough. That was a hard one for me.
Well, yeah, it's a trigger.
Yeah. He's got some amazing information, just the difference between the near death and the shared death, and
which I'm going to be honest, it was the first time for me. I had never heard of the shared death experience. Near death, you hear about them all the time.
Yeah.
But the shared death, I'm like, what is that? I've got to listen to the story because I don't even know how you do that.
No.
You know what I mean? But I mean, he explains why. I mean, they've got to reach vet, but and maybe the reason we don't hear about it as much is people are more hesitant to share that story than their own story, like their own near-death experience.
Yeah.
I mean, people are hesitant anyway about that, but I would think the shared death people are going to be like, oh, they don't believe me.
Well, the whole subject of death is so hard to
talk about anyway.
Yeah. So I can see where there's some just people who are reluctant or just scared. But but listen, guys, that was an amazing interview. If you're interested in that, please reach out to him. He's, as you could tell, he was a great guy to talk to. And I think that if you are interested in that, you should reach out to him. I think he'd be a great resource for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, any other thoughts other than I've got to pick my mind off the floor and.
Well, we will. I'll make sure and share on our Facebook page all the links to his website and to his music or like his meditation series that he has, so you can find those. And if you've had a near-death experience or a shared death experience and you want to share them with us, doesn't have to be put on the podcast. If you just want to email us at info@gxparanormal.com and share it with us, we'd love to do that, just to have like somebody to share it with.
Yeah.
We can talk with you privately.
Absolutely. And don't forget our Facebook and Instagram.
Like and follow.
Follow if you're on YouTube. Subscribe if you're listening on the platforms for audio. Follow us. Give us a rating. Hopefully it'll be 5 stars. Just saying. But other than that, guys, thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.